Hello everyone. Today we are going to have a discussion on 3 questions from GS2 governance part of the paper. Myself Vivek, let's get started. So before going into the question, let's have a look on what you have to look for in this discussion. So we are going to have a discussion on governance. If you look at the PYQs or questions which are coming in from governance part, one thing you can see is in governance there is every time a cross linkage between different questions. In 2022, if you look, there is a question from donor agencies, how these lead to weakening of community participation. Donor agency is a different concept, community participation is a different concept. Likewise, you can see in every year, like sometimes they ask e-governance, how e-governance will lead to local self-governments, empowerment of local self-governments, or it may lead to women empowerment, something like that. What you should know here is, questions may not be as direct, as straightforward as what you have prepared and going for the exam. Question can have different connecting linkages with different aspects of governance syllabus, as well as social justice, as well as polity, and sometimes with economy and other aspects of the question. Like in this year, you will see a question on Gati-Shakti. So you should have a broad approach how you are going to generate points. If a question came on different aspects of different linkaged question came, how you are going to generate points. This you should have a clarity, and that is something which should be your key takeaway from the whole discussion what we are having. Clear? Let's move ahead. So this is the first question we are going to discuss. The Gati-Shakti Yojana needs meticulous coordination between the government and the private sector to achieve the goal of connectivity. Discuss. So what are you going to write? Gati-Shakti program or the scheme is always in news. It's being launched in last October or so. So it's not something which you haven't heard. Most of students will be well aware of it, and it's not a difficult question also. It's very straightforward question. So in introduction, one of the best approach here is you can start with defining what is Gati-Shakti scheme. That will suffice your introduction part. Second, in body, what you are going to write is, what is asked? Meticulous coordination between government and private sector to achieve the goal of connectivity. So discuss is the keyword. So what you have to do here is, you don't need to critically analyze the scheme. You don't need to go into that positive, negative mindset. Here what it demands is, you need to show how meticulous coordination between government and private sector. This will lead to how connectivity, how this coordination will lead to better implementation of connectivity projects or realizing the goal of connectivity. So this you have to show in your answer, in your body. Clear? Conclusion, you can always conclude with some way forward or with some vision, connecting it some with future vision India is upholding or India is trying to achieve through this scheme. Likewise, you can give a conclusion. So this is a basic structure you need to follow in this question. Let's move ahead. So introduction, as I told, we have PM Gati-Shakti is a digital platform to bring different ministries. When it was started, there were 16 ministries. Now the count is 30 and it is increasing. Now if it is an infra project, who will be the stakeholders? Major ministries. Railways will be there, roadways will be there, waterways will be there. This will be major ministries. And why they are coming together? For integrated planning and coordinated implementation of projects. So you don't need to memorize the whole segment of it. What you need, who are coming together, different ministries to implement coordinated implementation of the planning and implementation of projects. This thing you need to know. Now here I have shown different dimensions of Gati-Shakti scheme. You can see different ministries are there. There is a national master plan for implementation. There is a target of 25,000 kilometer roads to be constructed by 2023. And government has come with a unified logistics interface platform. This platform will provide data. like so much, all the data regarding infrastructure projects will be collected by the government and single platform will provide the data. And there is system for sharing it with private sector also. So different aspects is shown here, like private train project was there. So one mistake which you need to avoid here is, the question is not telling you to list down different provisions in Gati-Shakti scheme. The question is regarding another aspect. So you should not, it's a 10-marker question. So of the 2 pages you have, you should not do the mistake of writing on Gati-Shakti in the one full page. You can start with Gati-Shakti, 2-3 lines it will take. That is all needed from Gati-Shakti aspect. Now you can use all these points in explaining how different government sector and private sector should come together in all these aspects, so that better goal should be achieved. That you can use, but this should not be explained as such. That mistake you should be taking note of and you should avoid. Now the major part of the question, how meticulous coordination between government and private sector will lead to better implementation of the projects. So here, how you can generate points so that you will comprehensively cover all dimensions. One approach I suggest is, go for the life cycle. We are talking about infra projects. So how an infra projects planning or development will start? First step will be identification. Identification means what project should be implemented, like is there a demand for an airport, or is there a demand for a railways or roadways, whatever it is. Identifying what project is needed. Once a project is identified, there should be some level of planning, designing, like different variables you should set, like there should be the size of the project, the different dimensions, like in future expansion, what it is, the prospects. So these aspects should be taken note of. Now after the planning, there come financing. How the project can be financed, like government will be the sole financier, or government and private sector will combinedly fund the project, or private sector itself will take up the project. These aspects should be dealt here. Now after financing, we have clearance. If any projects, like if suppose an airport is to be constructed, there should be environmental clearance to be get, and other so many clearances, departmental clearances. So that aspects. After that, land acquisition. Now once land acquisition, we already know there are so many issues going on for years. So if you can cite one or examples how coordinated attempts will solve some of the issues, it will suffice. Now once land is acquired, there will be construction phase or implementation phase. Now once construction implementation phase of the project, after that maintenance will be there, and there will be end of life. So this is the whole life cycle of a infrastructure projects. Now if you think in this aspect, like how government sector and private sector coming together will lead to better identification of projects. How coming together of government and private sector lead to better designs, better planning. How better financing options, how we can explore those. And how clearances, in all these aspects, if you can think and generate 1 to 2 or 3 points in each head, then that will suffice. It will give you more than 10 points. In a 10-marker question, this is more than enough. So the takeaway is the approach which we are following to generate different points regarding this. Let's move ahead. So as I already told, in project identification, you can always cite promotion of Swiss challenge method. What is Swiss challenge method? It is private sector can itself come up with and government and say this project should be implemented. Private sector can come up with projects. Now usually what happens, government will decide whether the project should be constructed or not. Then government will start the tendering process and all other process. In Swiss challenge method, private sector can propose and come up with a projects. So what government should do? Government should promote the Swiss challenge method. What private sector, what should be their role? They should stay away from all the collusive aspects. Like it is not taking off in Indian infrastructure regime, Swiss challenge method, due to collusive aspects and corruption between the private sector. So private sector should avoid this, while government should adopt different methods like institutional methods to better implementation of Swiss challenge method. So in project identification we got 1 point. Now in project planning and design, as I already told, government as a part of Gati-Shakti has implemented a ULIP, that is an integrated portal which will give all data. Now if government is giving all data, private sector can do lot with this data. Private sector can develop different apps, develop different insights, develop what kind of projects will be optimum, different AI models, different models can be used to propose or project what will be future aspects in 25 years and what kind of projects we should do the investment. All this research and analytical part can be taken up by private sector, while the data government is providing through the ULIP portal under the Gati-Shakti scheme. So this can lead to better projects implementation. Now project financing, like if you can cite, remember, National Infrastructure Project pipeline was launched by the government on just before this Gati-Shakti came into implementation. Here government is implementing something like 1 lakh crore rupees infrastructure investment will be done. In this, private sector itself constitute 22% of the investment. So private sector itself is a big stakeholder, like direct financing is going on. Now in private sector may not be able to take up all the projects. Something like some projects in Northeast where suppose a airport is to be developed in Sikkim, then private sector may not be so much enthusiastic to invest there. So government can come up with guarantees, government can provide guarantees, government can expand the viability gap funding proposals. So these are different aspects in financing how government and private sector can come together and lead to better connectivity projects. Now in clearances what we can do, we already have a single window system. So Gati-Shakti platform can be integrated with a single window system, and this will lead to faster clearances. It will take less time. This already we have an integrated database. So all this can be integrated into Gati-Shakti scheme. And judicial issues can be tackled, like whenever a infrastructure project is like in talks, there will be some judicial, somebody will fight the case in Supreme Court saying this project is destroying the environment, the project is destroying the livelihood of tribals or livelihood of people living there. So these cases, if you already know the case of judiciary, more than 3.5 crore cases are pending in judiciary. So it will be taking maybe 5 years. So the whole process will be delayed for that much of time. So to avoid this, government can come up with some sort of special courts or some sort of tribunal. So all this can be established. Now addressing land acquisition, how can this be done by integrating government as well as private sector? Land acquisition, aspect of land acquisition is done by a private company, it leads to so much clashes. So it is better government do all the land acquisition. Government will do all the land acquisition, while private sector can, what they can do, they can co-invest in the rehabilitation projects. So this is something innovation, like co-invest in rehabilitation projects by the same company. This one lead to better land prospects in land acquisition. Now project construction, project implementation, think on example lines, like we already have a private train project. The project hasn't take off, like government come with a proposal, government call the tender, but very low interest from private sector. So this should be somehow tackled, like government should come up with something, offer more flexibility, offer more freedom for the private sector to run the trains, to handle the track signals and future aspects of it. So government could add little bit of flexibility in private train aspect that you can cite. In other Shekhar committee, this committee have cited that government need to integrate private sector in critical infrastructure along border areas. So private sector has a lot of technologies like L&T and other private sector have huge amount of technology. So this technological aspects can be used for strategic interest like building crucial infrastructure projects. This can be employed. So in operation and maintenance, like in private structure or infrastructure projects, what we will see is usually it is a 25-year or 30-year. So what happens in there will be unforeseen issues. For example, we have this, suppose a road is constructed, toll is to be collected, and then COVID came. Then when COVID came, all the toll collection will go for a toss. So in that case, if government look for strict implementation of the whatever the contract it is, that will lead to private sector will find it very difficult. So government should at least provide some flexibility in contracts, at least in long-term contracts for unforeseen issues. Now the whole Gati-Shakti aspect we are talking about infrastructure projects in India, while this is equally applicable for infrastructure projects outside India also, like you can industrial corridor with Bangladesh or India, Myanmar, Thailand, trilateral highway, all these aspects, cross-regional aspects also, the Gati-Shakti has a future and government can promote private sector through Gati-Shakti in implementation of strategic projects across the region, not just in India. So if you think, I already given you a framework to think, there is very easy to generate points and the points which you are generated will comprehensively answer all dimensions regarding the infrastructure and goal of connectivity. So this is what you need to do in the answer and this will address the key demands of the question. Let's move ahead. In conclusion, we can come with some vision which India is trying to achieve, something like 20 trillion by 2040 on back of this infrastructure development. Second, you can change that so far Gati-Shakti is a platform of interministries. Now if Gati-Shakti truly want to be a game changer, it should expand into including all stakeholders like private sector, international issues I have already told, and all processes should be brought under Gati-Shakti. Then only it can be a real game changer and true vision of these connectivity projects can be realized through Gati-Shakti. So this is how you can conclude the answer. So overall, I have explained what should be your approach to this question and what are different dimensions. In points, you can always add on with new current affairs coming, new events happening, you can always add on points. But the approach should be, if you think on a life cycle approach of an infrastructure project, it becomes very easy to generate points and it will comprehensively add all the dimensions regarding the aspects of infrastructure projects. So that's it. Let's move to the next question. Reforming the government delivery system through the direct benefit transfer scheme is a progressive step, but it has limitations to comment. So if you go to answer this question, this is some question which you will feel really happy about, because DBT is something very everyone studies, we are always in news, and every material you go through it will have DBT schemes, its positive, negatives. So and the question is also asking, the framework is also very easy. Like you give an introduction, the question is demanding two things: how DBT scheme is a progressive step. Comment is the keyword. So we will try to elaborate on what is the statement given. So how DBT is a progressive step. Now what are its limitations? You can include a way forward if you have space. So the question topic is also simple, what is asked is also very simple. It's a very easy straightforward question. In this kind of question, what you have to focus is, you have only 2 pages. You write about positives of DBT and it filled your this much, and you have little space for writing limitations. Even though if you have so much points, you should have a sense how much you are going to write, how much you are going to implement, and how the 2 pages you are going to divide on different headings. This thing you should have a clarity on. Rest, it's a very straightforward. Let's see what you're going to do. In introduction, you can either start with defining what is DBT. Here also you don't need to memorize everything on DBT. You can generate a definition during the exam itself. DBT, what it does, it directly transfers the subsidies or other transfers into the account of beneficiaries. So that is what DBT does. Now you can cite one example, PM Kisan scheme, where the 6,000 rupees is transferred to the farmer account directly by the government. So you can cite one example. So this will suffice your introduction. Another approach to introduction is, you can cite some data. If you can remember any data regarding DBT, it's a very good approach to start with a data. Like in 2021-22, 6.3 lakh crore transfer were rupees 6.3 lakh crore transfers was done through DBTs, and 717 crore transactions were carried out. If you have any data, you can always start the answer with data also. Both are very equally good options. Let's move ahead. Next thing in body, first thing what we're going to address is how DBT is a progressive step. How DBT is a progressive step. How you can generate points in this question. Last question, we look at the life cycle of infrastructure projects. What we can do here is, what are the stakeholders involved? See, if DBT, however the DBT is coming, it is coming from the government. So there is government, there is a beneficiary, of course, whose accounts the transfers are being made, and there is a market. Why market is coming here? Because government earlier was giving kind. Kind means different goods were giving directly into the beneficiary, and now the government is giving money. So there is some market linkages. So these are different stakeholders you can find in these questions, and you can think on these regards. How DBT is a progressive step for government. Example, it can lead to better identification of beneficiaries. It can lead to preventing leakages. It can lead to smooth integration across different ministries. And how it is beneficiary, it's a progressive step for beneficiary. Like COVID came, we have seen so much of transfers happening. Like it will lead to accountability. You can, if money hasn't came, you can always go and check. It will give to more freedom to the beneficiary to how to use, how to prioritize his demands. So different aspects you can think from the beneficiary aspect. How from market aspect also, if you can think of 2-3 points, you already get more than 9-10 points. So that will suffice. That is how one way of approaching these questions. Cool. Let's move ahead. So that is what is done here. You have from government side, if you think it will lead to better identification. If you can cite some data like how it lead to better identification, because we have Aadhaar framework, we have Aadhaar linked bank accounts, then we link it with PAN card. So all this will give government a better picture on who is the real beneficiary and who is not. This can be very purposeful tool. Second, preventing of frauds. It can lead to like fake beneficiaries can be avoided, as already told. Now it can also lead to leakages, checking leakages. If you can remember the Pahal scheme. What is Pahal scheme? The LPG subsidy scheme. In this scheme, around rupees 60k crore were saved by the government in 4 years of implementing the scheme. So this you can cite a very good example. Now smooth coordination among ministries and departments. Like earlier a fund, if has a fund to reach beneficiary, central government fund, suppose it has to come through state government, then district administration, then local bodies, then beneficiary. Now you can just give it directly to the beneficiary. So a lot of middle hassles, steps are eliminated. So government process become very easy. Now it also reduces burden on government to directly provide goods and services. Like you can cite example, Food Corporation of India. How much of food wastage is happening? 30% of food grains are getting wasted, or some data you can cite on wasting food regarding the food security as Food Corporation aspect. You can cite it here. Now this is all from government aspects. Now you can think from beneficiary aspects, like it promote accountability. Like there will be social audit, there will be other audits where government and the beneficiary will be directly a part of. Other aspects, earlier when suppose a Manrega worker didn't get paid in time. Earlier when he approaches the institution, there will be always like passing the ball attitude. Something like it is due to fund didn't came from here, and the Manrega worker mostly he don't have tools like RTA, he don't have the knowledge or access capacity to file RTA. So he will be always out of the system. Now when DBT is here, he can actually know if fund hasn't came, this is the issue, here is it is being blocked, this is the issue. He can really have an opportunity to make the political people accountable to whatever is happening. So you can cite that. Ease of service delivery, I already told, there is no middleman involved. The funds are directly being transferred into no contractor, no any other person are involved. Relief transfer, this you can always cite. In COVID times, some data is there, like around 98 crore beneficiaries the DBT transfers have been done. So this is a very great achievement. You can cite, if you remember the data, you cite that. Otherwise, you can always remember that PM Garib Kalyan Yojana. So PM Garib Kalyan Yojana was implemented through DBT. So this you can always cite. So another is from market perspective, if you think, shifting to income support over subsidies, something, what is benefit of shifting to income supports? Like if you remember, Indian government has some sugar subsidy program. This program in 2019 or 20 was being contested in the WTO by Brazil, Australia and other countries, and India lost the case. So subsidies always have some issues. Subsidies always creates a market distortion, not only the international market, within Indian market also. Why there is so much corruption with PDS? Because government is providing rice for 1 rupee, 2 rupee. So if the PDS guys can like black market it, it can easily sell it for 30 rupees, 40 rupees. So there is huge market distorting elements if government is providing subsidies or directly providing goods and services. That can be eliminated by providing income, direct income. That is what we have seen in PM Kisan scheme. So this example you can also cite. So the whole picture, if you think on different stakeholders dimensions, it's become very easy to generate points, and 2-3 examples in each direction you can easily generate. So that will substantiate our first part of the answer, that is how DBT is a progressive step. Now coming on to the second part of the question, what are the limitations of the DBT scheme? So how you are going to address this part? We can follow the same approach. With government, these are the issues of DBT scheme. With a beneficiary, these are the issues with DBT scheme. Now with a market, these are the issues. You can follow the same approach. So in identification, what is the issue government is facing? It's always good, Aadhaar with bank account, with PAN linkage, it's having a very foolproof system. But it's still not fully implemented. There are still loopholes in identification of beneficiaries. Most of the DBT scheme use socio-economic caste census 2011. It is always 11 years old. So the caste, we don't have enough data, and even the caste census is having its own limitations. It is not fully a statutory census data. So having data errors are there. So inclusion and exclusion errors are totally not avoided with the implementation of DBT. Second, now DBT need bank accounts, DBT needs digital systems. So if you don't have these, there is still the people who are left out of this, then your DBT system is having severe limitations. You can cite that when the Aadhaar linked PDS intake was implemented, the people who were left out were the most vulnerable people, those who are tribals, those who are from remote rural areas, these people were left out. Most vulnerable people were worst affected. You can cite that. Now policy distortion, how it leads to policy distortion, you can see PM Kisan scheme. In this scheme, the landed farmers are getting the money, but there are so many farmers in India who don't own land in their name. They will be farming in some other's land. So all these people are left out. So since we need a foolproof system for identification of beneficiaries, we made the DBT, we made all this. But at the same time, a different section of the people who really need help, who really need assistance are being left out of the policy. So this is an issue you can cite in your answer. Now DBT is also leading to politicization. Despite it having so much of benefits, it's not that it will not be used for politicization. So some election is coming, government is coming with a scheme with having name of Prime Minister XYZ scheme or Chief Minister XYZ scheme. Now the idea of coming behind this kind of names and this kind of schemes is that political mileage, to get the political mileage out of it. So politicization of DBT schemes are also happening. Now misuse of transfers, this is one of the major issues. Like for say, if suppose X, so misuse of transfers. So what it says is, like suppose X money is transferred into account of the beneficiary. We already know, even though the transfer is done to the woman account, We already know our society is highly patriarchal. Highly patriarchal means the bank accounts will be mostly operated by the members of the family. Now, if men is operating the family account, operating the bank account, there is always a chance the money will be given for food intake, for nutrition, etc. But there is always a risk of money being used for liquor, gambling, smoking, etc. All these things comes into picture. So there is no guarantee the XYZ transfer will be used for intended benefits. So this is also a limitations of DBT. You can think on similar lines and generate 4, 5, 6 points, and that will suffice the demands of the question. So this is a 10 marker. You have only 2 pages. If you have space, you can go for a way forward 2, 3 points, or you can make your conclusion itself a way forward, like within a 1 paragraph, and like that also. So since we are learning it, just see what are few options for improving the DBT system. So in Economic Survey 2015-16, it has said that it analyzed how the paradigm of DBT, and it come up with the outcome that DBT is of course very good, but it cannot be implemented everywhere. There BAPU is also necessary. What is BAPU? Biometric Authenticated Physical Uptake, BAPU. So at some cases there is still need for physically delivering the services. All the government services cannot be delivered through DBT. So that is the finding of Economic Survey 2015-16. You can cite that. Second, we have recently came up with a new system of e-rupee. What e-rupee does? It will give e-voucher. Instead of giving money into the account of beneficiary, it will give e-vouchers. And what this e-vouchers will do? E-vouchers can be used only for buying XYZ things. Like if a e-voucher is generated for buying food grains, this can be only used for buying food grains. So by this way we can avoid the misuse of transfers. That problem can be addressed by e-rupee. So this is still not fully implemented in large scale. So you can cite like implementing this in a larger scale, or better institutionalization of e-rupee can lead to better implementation of DBT schemes. Now there is a international case study you can always cite, Brazil's Bolsa Familia program. This program, all the money transfers, most of the money transfers are done to the female bank accounts. So you can cite that how it implemented, it can, to some extent it can check patriarchy. So conclusion, you can come up with, even though this DBT is a very progressive step, there is need for more reforms, more changes, and more spirit of innovation should be upheld so that this whole system becomes more better and beneficiaries will be benefited. At the same time, government will also. So similarly, you can cite a diplomatic stance and conclude the answer. So hope I addressed all part of the question and you got the approach. Like in this question, in first question, we have followed a life cycle approach. We see in the infrastructure aspect, how different parts of life and connect it with the demands of the question. In this question, we followed a stakeholder approach. We see what are the stakeholders involved in this case, and we try to generate points depending on the perspective of each stakeholders. Clear? So let's move ahead to the next question. This is the final question for the day. So let's go through the question 1. Do you agree with the view that increasing dependence on donor agencies for development reduces the importance of community participation in the development process? Justify your answer. So you can see this is, on first read it seems a little bit of tough question. How you are going to address it? This is one of the interlinkage question, which interlinkage came from aspects which you are not well aware of. So that's being a challenge in this question. So how are you going to address this? Here we have a donor agencies. See what all is including in this. Donor agency is there, then we have community participation, and then we have development process. So donor agency, community participation, development process. These are different keywords from the question which you can take out. Now you should have a basic clarity on what is this donor agencies. Who are they? It includes World Bank, it includes Asian Development Bank, it includes wealth funds, it includes JICA of JSE of Japan. So these kind of organizations which will give funds in developing countries, especially like India or African countries or other developing countries, for developmental projects, they will give the funding. So these kind of agencies are called developmental donor agencies. So this basic understanding you should have. Now community participation, you should also know that community participation means it includes civil society, it includes government system, it includes NGOs, it includes pressure group, SHGs, all those things which you have read in the syllabus, all comes under community participation. So this understanding also you should have. One more conceptual clarity if I see, suppose you can think World Bank is a developmental agency. Now if World Bank is implementing a project, how will World Bank implement a project? One option is World Bank may directly implement the project in India. Another option is through the government, World Bank, and like you have seen that some scheme 50% of the funding will be coming from government, 50% done by the government. So through the government also World Bank are implementing the projects. Another option is through NGOs. These donor agencies can give fund to NGOs and they will implement the projects. So there are different ways how the developmental projects are being implemented. So if you can think on different dimensions, and if you want to generate points, if on each of these dimensions what are the issues, what are the positives you can think of, it becomes very easy to generate points. Even though it's on first look it looks like a very difficult question, but some kind of brainstorming if you can do on different keywords given in the question, you can still decently attempt this question. Clear? So intro, body, conclusion, what you're going to write? In intro you can start with defining who are the donor agencies. You can cite some examples. In body you can include the keyword here is justify your answer. Do you agree is being asked. So do you agree means you can write two aspects to it. First aspect is how donor agencies will reduce community participation. On that you can generate points, the first part of the body. In the second part you can say how donor agencies are not always bad. They also promote community participation in some aspects, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can write points, and in conclusion you can clearly state this is your opinion and this should be done or this should be the futuristic option available. So something like that you can cover up the whole demands of the question. So let's move ahead. So this is introduction, you can see here. Donor agencies delivers, and it's also not, you don't need to by heart all the projects. If you have a basic thinking process, you can easily build up these definitions within the exam hall itself. Donor agencies, what they done? They delivers aid or execute development projects in aid recipient countries, which can be India or any other countries. An example you can see, World Bank is funding the DRIP project. What is DRIP project? It is a dam rehabilitation, dam strengthening, dam data collection, all these aspects. This project is being funded by the World Bank. You cite an example, you give a very straightforward, simple definition on it. This will give suffice what you want to write in the introduction. Let's move ahead. So here we have donor agencies, how importance of donor agencies in community participation. Like how donor agencies are reducing community participation. So how are you going to address how are you going to generate points here? Here you can, one approach is you can follow the stakeholder approach we used in the previous question. Like we have the donor agencies, you have the community, you have development project, and this will be maybe implemented through NGOs also. So you can easily derive 2-3 points how the approach of the donor agency will lead to reducing community participation. How, if NGOs are involved, you are already may have a lot of points on issues of NGOs. So 1-2 issues you can cite and how it lead to weaker community participation. Now if developmental projects, how government system may be weakened, how accountability system may not be available, on different dimensions you can think of and generate points. Here also a stakeholder approach is very effective in this question also. So let's see how we have done here. See, if the government, sometimes the conflicting interest, suppose conflicting interest, suppose coal, take the example of coal. Suppose World Bank is coming. World Bank say that there should be promotion of clean energy, there should be government, World Bank will be more interested to fund renewable energy. But our national interest is, our most important priority is development, poverty reduction. For these aspects we need cheap fuel or cheap electricity. For that coal is inevitable for India. So India's developmental vision needs coal. At the same time the donor agencies may not be so much interested in funding for coal. So what I am trying to say is, here there will be a conflict of interest or conflicting interest between government agencies and government policies or national interest. This come into picture. Now government, these donor agencies can have ulterior motives. Ulterior, mainly bad motives. Some, you can cite some IB report in 2014 which says that environmental activism is being funded from outside so that the developmental projects in India will be stalled. IB report you can cite. Now sovereignty issues, like in Sri Lanka we have seen the debt checkbook diplomacy of Sri Lanka by China in Sri Lanka. This lead to debt crisis, sovereignty issues in Sri Lanka or other countries. This you can cite. And how donor agencies come into picture, like you can cite Asian Development Bank. China is the highest stakeholder and China is the most influential member of the Asian Development Bank, and if this bank is coming to implement projects, China may have a upper hand in influencing its policies. So likewise you can connect it with donor agencies and you can make a point on their motives. Secondly, if a donor agency is coming to implement a project, it's not that they will come and implement the projects as with the giving all the freedom on other dimensions. There will be so much obligations, there will be so much XYZ to be fulfilled. Like if IMF is coming, IMF is giving fund for Sri Lanka recently we have seen, but IMF come with so much of reforms, these XYZ, these all reforms you implement, then you give the next quota of funding, like that. And consultants, like a project is to be implemented, the government agency will approve only international consultants, something like Goldman Sachs or McKinsey, these kind of consultants, then the project has to taking them into consideration also. These kind of obligations will come with these projects involving donor agencies. Second, I already told, there is NGOs involved, there is always a scope for corruption. Now how corruption? You can cite some data, like CBI recently cited in the Supreme Court that less than 10% of the NGOs are really filing the audit reports, and NGOs have so many accusations on misplacing the fund, misappropriation of the funds. So all this you can cite as a corruption examples. Now you think about the other aspects, like here we were thinking on donor agencies aspects. Now here you can think on policy aspect or beneficiary aspect. Here the project implemented may be top-down approach. What is top-down approach? Suppose a project is to be implemented, suppose nutrition approach. Nutrition problem need to be resolved. Sometimes these donor agencies, World Bank will come and say distribute egg or meat in the midday meal scheme. Now it is worldwide it is approved, like eating egg or meat will be good for nutritious, addressing the nutrition problem. But the problem here is it will lead to conflicts with social values, conflict with religious values. This will lead to more problems. So these donor agencies will not be completely aware of social realities that is existing within the communities in India. So this can lead to issues. Top-down approach of planning, designing, all these things. Now alienation of masses, how this comes into picture? Like we have seen the success of Jan Dhan Yojana. Now Jan Dhan Yojana, we have created accounts for so many people, crores of accounts being opened. One major issue we have found here is, even though the accounts are being opened, even though it is operable account, people are not using the accounts. People are not making use of it. In Swachh Bharat mission, toilets were being made, but the problem coming were people are not using the toilets. So how this can be addressed, that will through behavioral approach. You can see Mr. Prime Minister taking the Jadu and cleaning the roads. So this will inspire people to make the changes in their behavior. So if donor agencies involved, the scope for having this kind of approach will be very less. Now there is accountability issues, like if a donor agency is funding the project, CAG report may not be available, especially if it's funding through NGOs. There will be limited provision to use the Right to Information Act provisions. So this also major issues. Now if donor agencies are coming in and extending the benefits every now and then this can also lead to less cooperation within the society. Like people will create an attitude, they will always take the demands and they will not use the project for purposeful aspects. Like suppose XYZ money is being transferred, this money is purposefully used only if it is used for sustainable income development. Now if this money is being just spent on any aspects and then the beneficiary is waiting for next round of funding to come, then this will lead to so much issues. Another aspect is social audit provision will not be available with the people. So people contact with development will go for a toss. Another aspect is there will not be no long-term commitment. Like if a World Bank is funding a project maybe for 2 years or 4 years or 10 years, but after that what will be the status of the project? If government is funding, there is a sense of sustainability in the future, but if these donor agencies are coming, there is always a risk of what is a long-term future or what will happen to the project. So these are different aspects you can think of, you can generate points. I think I have covered most of the points here. You can take away the approach we have followed here is stakeholder approach. We think from the perspective of donor agencies, we think from the perspective of beneficiaries, then we generated the points. Let's move ahead. Since this question, do you agree? So there is always a scope for writing counter perspective. And what is counter perspective? Donor agencies are not always bad. Why they are not always bad? They bring in so much funding. Like if you take India, there is always capital crunch. There is always need for more funding. So donor agencies complement government's efforts. Donor agencies complement government efforts in filling the funding gap. Second, they bring in modern technologies. One example you can cite is the bullet train. Who is funding it? Japan's JICA is funding it. They are bringing modern technologies. Then what if a World Bank is trying to implement a project? They are not just implementing the scheme in India. They may be implementing it in Bangladesh, in African countries. So they have huge expertise with them. One is they have huge expertise. Secondly, they have best practices, well aware of best practices. So these experience can be very handy when donor agencies are involved. Now they usually World Bank is involved. They promote noble vision. What is noble vision? Gender equality or something like inclusive development. All these noble vision will be upheld by the donor agencies. Then skill development and training. You can give the example of Nine-Manzil scheme. What is Nine-Manzil scheme? It gives leadership training to minority women, and around 50% of the women will be 50% of the funding will be done by the World Bank, and this minority women will be trained on leadership aspect, business aspect, skill development aspect, all these. Also, these donor agencies are also giving training to the civil servants. Also, they are giving training to the students, college students, school students, etc. So an exposure with World Bank will give a lot of career opportunities for students. So in different aspects, donor agencies are promoting community participation also. They are bringing fund and installing new projects, means more community participation. Technology integration is happening, standards, best practices are coming, skill development is happening, they are upholding very progressive vision. So through all these aspects, donor agencies are creating more community participation also. That is what you want to say here. Now you can conclude the answer on a diplomatic note here, because donor agencies, even though there are limitations, they have certain utilities also. That is your opinion on how far do you agree. Clearly stating your opinion is always good in this kind of answer, and it should not be personal also. You have given the reason on both aspects, and you are given the explanation for whatever the inference you have written here. Now you can write a few words on best way forward, like whoever be the implementing agency, be it government, be it private sector or donor agencies, what we need is inclusive citizen-centric development processes. If that is there, whoever funding the project is not going to impact that much. So you can cite something like this, if you way forward an idea. If this is something which you need to institutionalize, this is something which you need to uphold, irrespective of who is the funding agency or who is the donor agency. So if this is there, things are going to be okay. So on a forward looking note, you can conclude the answer likewise. So that is all for today. So what we have done today is we discussed 3 questions from governance. We have discussed 2 different approaches. One is a life cycle approach, we see in that infrastructure Gati-Shakti question. Now we have seen a stakeholder approach. We have seen this approach in the later two questions. So these are different ways. If you think on these lines, the generating points part become very easy. That you should keep in mind in answering all the governance or social justice questions. So that's all for today. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed the session. All the best.